Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist. Today I want to bring you a talk video that I've been stewing on for a few months now, ever since I watched the god-awful fourth installment of the Fear Street movie franchise called Prom Queen. You know, the in-name only movie adaptation to this classic original run Fear Street book called The Prom Queen. And I have to say, there's a big question mark for me wanting to make this video, whether I'm being a hopeless optimistic or being in vain even trying to make a suggestion for this franchise when it could be just dead in the water. Now, I'm not trying to say that Fear Street is a bad movie series. I really enjoyed the original trilogy of 1994, 1978, and 1666. And from what I gather, they took source material from some early Fear Street Saga books, and they also took source material from a classic Fear Street book called Lights Out. I'm curious to read those at some point as well. But stemming off Prom Queen for just one last moment here, I knew that this was going to be the new direction moving forward of the franchise, where they're making standalone adaptation films based on just books in the Fear Street lore, based around Shadyside or what have you. And the Prom Queen seemed to be like a big buzzed about book, so I strategically read this book after I watched the movie to see maybe what the book got right over the movie or what have you. And once I realized it was pretty much entirely in name only, it made me think of why did they go that route? And I have to say that while this book is good, it wouldn't make a good horror movie. So I get that direction choice of the producers. That doesn't shortchange that this is a good book, but this should be the jumping off point for all you Fear Street fans, most likely watching out there, that just because a book is a good Fear Street book, it doesn't mean it will translate well to be a good Fear Street movie. So with that thought in mind, I saw some other people talking about this topic on the internet, specifically on YouTube and blog and website posts, and I thought I'd chime my 2 cents in to some books that I think that the Fear Street franchise needs to adapt. Now, this is my list, of course. I'm very picky when it comes to Fear Street, I think. I'm more horror driven. I'm not more mystery thriller driven, even though there is, I think, one hugely overt mystery thriller book in this list that I think would make a fantastic movie. I would dare say that in the modern landscape, though, you have to either be really good at being a mystery thriller, or you become really middling and people just forget that you exist. So for me, I wanted to stick with the more horror-driven stories that you can literally lift from the source material and not change too much to make into a movie. Because when you go the in-name only route, you're not only alienating the fan base who reads the books, but you also beg the question of why did you choose to adapt that book to begin with? Which brings me back to Prom Queen. So I have 7 choices here. I'm obviously going to be omitting a lot on the table for Fear Street. Some people might be pissed off at me for doing that. I get that. If you are a hardened Fear Street book fan and you think it's, mystery thriller or bust, have at it. Let me know down in the comment section what books you think you would like to adapt. But if you're like me and you want to separate the films from the books and you know Fear Street, what picks do you think I'm omitting that you think would actually translate very well into movies? With that being said, let's get into my list. Now, I should also mention some of these I have not read, but I've had heavily spoiled to me. Not by my choosing, but I know basically what happens in all these ones that I put on here that I haven't read. So that should tell you that I've done my homework a little bit, and I've filed away in the back of my mind, which ones I'm like, you know what, that one would be a good movie if they did it right. So I'm also going to give suggestions and in my thoughts of how they should make the movies, or maybe movies to look to inspiration to do the book justice. So these first 2 here I'm going to be bringing up are the books I haven't read, at least. And for number 7, this is the most mystery thriller out of the picks on this list. And this one was spoiled to me, sadly, but hearing about it, it reminded me of a very cool M. Night Shyamalan movie called The Visit. But if you blended that in with those classic straight-to-TV thriller movies from the 90s. And when I think on to the potential of this movie, All you need to do is invoke the feeling that M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit had, but putting it into a style that looks like Frank Darabont's Buried Alive. And we're going to be bringing up Ski Weekend. Now, Ski Weekend is a very simple story for a movie. You have a group of teenagers going off to a snowy mountainside and being snowed up there and essentially stuck with a group of strangers that they don't know if they can trust. And over time, as they stay isolated and secluded with these individuals, they discover that these individuals are lying to them about who they are and their intentions, and they're possibly bad people that could harm them. And the way I've heard the story is told seems to be a masterwork in the thriller mystery side that Fear Street tends to offer. Now, if you want to translate this to a horror movie, all you need to do is add in some extra teenagers, introduce a slight slasher element into the mix where people die. And I think that if you're able to capture the aesthetic, the isolation of the story, and really get the viewers invoked in the setting and the suspense of it all, this would be a solid film. The problem is, though, that with a lot of mystery thriller movies out in the ether, especially on Netflix, the ones with the shock value seem to have most resonance, and the ones that are middling are extremely forgettable and never talked about. So you run the risk of that, but if you ace it, you got something good here. So Ski Weekend is my first pick. My next pick goes to a book that was also spoiled to me, but hearing about it, it sounds like if you took the premise of Freaky Friday and you blended it in with this classic 80s Wes Craven movie called The Deadly Friend. And the book in question is Switched. Now, Switched seems to be R.L. Stine's favorite Fear Street book whenever fans ask him what Fear Street book is his favorite. And hearing about it and having it spoiled to me, I can understand why. This would be a body-swapping slasher story, exploring the supernatural of Shadyside, of course. There is a mechanism involved in how bodies are switched in this story that is kind of creative. And you have this rivalry of sorts between the two main characters, fighting over identity and all of that, and a body count even. I think that this would be a riveting story. It would be a short and sweet film. And I think a lot of fans, especially hardened Fear Street fans, would be stoked to see this one adapted somewhat faithfully. So that's why it's here on the list at number 6. At number 5, this is a book that I actually read recently. I just haven't made a Fear Street short on. We're now moving into the ones that I have read. And I read this one out of curiosity because on paper, it sounded like something straight out of H.P. Lovecraft mixed with, you know, some creativity on whoever wrote this book's part. I don't know if R.L. Stine wrote it or a ghostwriter wrote it. It reminds me of The Reanimator in a lot of ways, and I think this will be Fear Street's take on The Reanimator when you think about it. And the book in question is The Bad Girl from New Fear Street. Now, New Fear Street was a 4-book series that not a lot of people or casual Fear Street fans know about. And in this series, I saw that there was a lot of risks being taken, and I actually picked 2 books from this to be turned into films. This is just one of them. This one is a pretty straightforward story about 2 girls who are into science and they experiment around with a formula to, I don't know, make for science class. And they discover that this formula that they've accidentally made might have some supernatural connotations with it and can resurrect the dead. And of course, being scientists, they decide to experiment around with said formula, and they start on animals, and then it moves to, I guess, a human cadaver. And as you'd expect, you have this soulless undead revenant now hell-bent on getting some bloodshed. This would be a fun horror movie, right? This is a fun character exploration into the rights and wrongs of playing God and creating life, akin to something like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but more in the vein, like I said, of H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. And if you love the Reanimator movies, I think if they took inspiration from Reanimator and they spliced it into here, this would be fun. This would be fun. This could be an absolute gore fest. I could see it now if they were able to pull off the body horror in some fantastic ways. This one will really register here. And yeah, that's why it's on my list at number 5. Now, moving on to my number 4, this one I think has the most potential to be an absolute classic horror film if whoever is behind it knows what they're doing with this. When I look at the potential of this book, I think of two things. Rian Johnson's Knives Out and Glass Onion, and I think of the new Zach Cregger movie, Weapons. If you combined those films together with the premise and the plot of this book, this could be Fear Street's answer to those films. And that in question is The Dead Life Card. Now, The Dead Life Card is a super chiller from the Fear Street Super Chiller series. And this one I see commonly put on people's lists, so a lot of people seem to be on the same wavelength with me on this, that this would be a fantastic movie if they knew what they were doing. This is a very complex murder mystery book with multiple POV changes, hence why I brought up Zach Cregger's Weapons, because you would need multiple character POVs to tell a movie like this, because it's a deconstruction of essentially a person who died and has to discover that they're dead. And that there's also their killer still on the mix somewhere in the ether. And I think this will be a fun little story set in the summertime, nearby Shadyside at a, I guess country club, or, you have a pool lifeguard setting. This will be a fun one and a fun shakeup for a horror movie, I feel. There's not a lot of movies that have this vibe, and I think it would stand out for that. And especially if it was able to be executed in the ways that I brought up, this could be absolutely fantastic if it wanted to be. So that's why, with all the potential in the world, it's deserved at my number 4 slot. Moving on to my number 3, I just recently read this one not too long ago, and man, this would be so much fun to see. This would be set in the 1800s, and you would have a backdrop of that time period, similar to movies like, as of recent, The Cursed from 2021, or something like that thereof. And this would be a slasher/urban legend story set on Halloween in the 1800s, mind you, with a very intimidating villain, and I could see him becoming a horror icon if the film was willing to give him some justice. And the book in question we're going to be adapting for number 3 is Door of Death. Now, this book is considered the Jake Fear book. This goes back in time, like I said, to the 1800s, where there's this urban legend about Jake Fear, who is this scorn lover out to essentially kill adulterers and people doing wrong with, I guess, sexual favors. And he's summoned one Halloween night by these group of teenagers, and one by one, in a Final Destination-esque way, he goes down his list in order of who he wants dead first and brutally kills these teenagers. And I mean brutally. This would be a fantastic book to adapt to screen. They can even add some more characters here to add some more bloodshed. Can even expand more on Jake Fear's backstory and flashback elements that are present in the book. I know this one isn't written by R.L. Stine. It's actually written by Eric Weiner, who a lot of people don't know is the creator of Dora the Explorer, ironically. But I try to give R.L. Stine all the flowers in the world. But for this specific adaptation, I think they should put aside his name and his clout and just look at the story and the potential at hand, and they would have an absolute ball of a slasher, and a time period piece slasher, mind you. And this would be a fun time to be had. On to my top 2. Now, these 2 are basically my hardened top 2. Now, my number 2, I've mentioned in the past, was actually going to be turned into a Fear Street movie in the late 90s, but the Columbine high school tragedy happened and put a damper on making this film adaptation happen. And ironically, I honestly feel like parts of this book, or I guess maybe the script adaptation of it, was lifted and sent up into a very classic late 2000s teen horror movie known as Jennifer's Body. And if Jennifer's Body made a splash as it did, I think this one, especially in today's day and age with school tragedies and school shootings and whatnot, I think that this would register a whole lot more, and this would be one of the more emotional horror movies that can come out of this Fear Street franchise, and that is Scream, Jennifer Scream. The premise of this one is very straightforward. A group of teenagers are looking to cheat on their SATs, and one teenager in particular doesn't want to participate and tells the other teens that if they go through with the cheating, she's going to turn them in. And of course, they go through with it, and she's going to turn them in. So the teens are kind of forced to put their, black and white viewpoints of the world since they're teenagers at the forefront and make a drastic decision on how to handle this girl, and that may cost her life. But she comes back into the situation, and the teens are thrown off, and one by one, we see some vindication on what happened to said girl, and yeah, there's some really emotional resolution near the end and some impactful recontextualizations to be had there, but that is basically, prime and rich for a movie there. You know what I mean? This is just one of those situations where you can literally just take this from page to movie. It's ready to go. Now, there's some off-screen elements in the book that can easily be remedied by making it on-screen in the movie. That's all you really need to do to fix up some things here. Other than that, fantastic choice. I can't recommend it enough. All you have to do is try to emulate what Jennifer's body was doing, and you're good to go. Number one, I think, would be the shoe-in choice for a Fear Street horror movie. Now, this is the final book of the original series. It has an infamous reputation of being the scariest Fear Street book, and I have to say, so far, from what I've read, it is. It is a brutal book. It's like if you took The Breakfast Club and you blended it with The Descent. And it is claustrophobic, it is grungy, it is mean, and it's incredible. It's Trapped. Trapped, man. A book about, a motley crew of 5 kids in Saturday detention, nosing around Shadyside High School, and they find an underground tunnel system that leads to a nuclear bomb shelter that was built years ago underneath the school. And they get trapped down there, and they find this never-ending maze of darkness and dirt and unused facilities that may be the home to a specter who has been living down there all these years looking for some revenge. And as you'll read in the book, the body count and what the specter does to these individuals is absolutely crazy. Now this, I can totally see people being like, you know what, this would be a CGI fest kind of thing, or this would be a movie that probably would be stretched out too long from what it needs to be. And I can get that to a degree. But holy crap, would this book be terrifying if they were able to just pull out the natural horror of what being in a tunnel feels like, or being stuck in the dark with little to no light. This would be a darkly lit and grimy looking movie. But I'm telling you, if they were able to pull off the death sequences in some fun, practical effects kind of ways, I think that this would scar people. And this is probably the most original idea that I've come across in the Fear Street series that doesn't really feel like other things. It just feels like a mixture of things that are kind of unrelated. And I think this would stick out in people's memories and be a shoe-in standout movie for the Fear Street franchise. And that's why it's my number one pick for this video. Those were my picks for the Fear Street books that the movie franchise needs to adapt. Like I said before, let me know down in the comment section if I missed any, or what films you would add to the equation here to be adapted from the books. I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.